dictates everything you do, and the only path to deliverance may lie in another dimension. We are talking about the award-winning series of novels by Philip Pullman, His Dark Materials, which have now been reinvented, reimagined, and yet remain faithful to the core principles that were laid out in those novels by HBO in the new series, His Dark Materials. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the creative team that has brought this world to vivid life. All right, let's start with the creative genius that reinvented Doctor Who and a whole generation of great quality programming at the BBC, executive producer Jame Trantor. Soon to be Dame Jan Trantor.
Dame, really?
It's a long walk, Jame. Somebody like that. I did. I brought my own cheering section. Please welcome the young woman, famous to many of you as a very stabby mutant, X-23 in Logan.
Yeah!
Who now embodies Lyra Silvertongue Belacqua, Miss Dafne Keene. Sorry, I got very excited because I wanted to build up to the award-winning writing, Olivier award-winning writer who brought Harry Potter to the stage in the West End and on Broadway, the Tony and Olivier winning writer, Mr. Jack Thorne. There's Jack, everybody. I would like to introduce now an amazing actor. Actually, hold on 1 second. I wanted to make sure I did this correctly because this is a pretty scary individual, or not, the enigmatic, chilly, but maybe also heroic. You'll find out. Actress who plays Miss Marisa Coulter, played by a woman you may remember as a lovable sociopath in Luther. Who you may also remember as a sincerely anguished woman in The Affair, and now as a woman who knows exactly what she wants in His Dark Materials, Miss Bruce Wilson. Now, when we talk about this person, I really want us to think about all the roles they've played. Chronic underachiever, someone who's never been quite appreciated on any platform. The Grammy, Tony, and many other awards I can't even name. Force behind Hamilton and The Heights. The man you may know now as Texan balloonist and adventurer extraordinaire Lee Scoresby, Mr. Lin-Manuel Miranda. Glasgow's given many things to the world. But in one person, they gave us a mutant telepath, another sociopath, like Ruth's, but this one even more homicidally inclined, if that's possible, with many, many personalities. A man who has played all kinds of strange creatures, including a lovable fawn. Please join us, Mr. James McAvoy. So So I've got exciting news for you all tonight. We're actually going to watch the entire series here tonight.
Just 8 hours straight?
8 hours. And then we'll go for the next 2. How about that? Does everybody want to do that? No, but in fact, I want to show you something very special, which is, we're going to roll it now. Let's roll this amazing piece of footage. It is a classic work of fantasy that has been read by millions of people around the world, has been interpreted in at least 2 radio series, has been realized at the National Theatre as a 2-part play, and of course, is something people feel very attached to. So I'm wondering, what were you thinking when you decided to take this on?
I like a challenge. I thought it was time for the books to be liberated in a space which could do them justice. And I think that all of those different adaptations have all been brilliant in their different ways. But the real estate of contemporary television, being able to stretch those books out and really be able to sound every note that Philip Pullman sounded in the novels, I just felt it was time. And I was very persistent and very tenacious and very naggy around New Line Cinema and Philip Pullman to give me the rights to adapt it for television. And eventually they just got sick of me and said, fine, okay, go for it then. And we did.
You'll find Jane's a very hard person to say no to.
Yep.
Jack, I'm glad that you... I gave you a little space there at the beginning because I think you had an enormous job taking a vast universe and thinking about how that would live on television. The canvas that Pullman creates is so vast. I'm wondering, because of course you had taken on an iconic property before for the stage, what are the keys in terms of taking something that people feel so attached to and reinterpreting it? How do you not just scream for mercy?
He
I've done
does.
my fair share of screaming. I always describe it as doing a PhD. The first thing you've got to do is do a PhD in the author. So that's what I tried to do with Harry Potter, and that's what I've tried to do with his materials. To know everything and to have it all inside your head, so that then when you're starting doing the adapting, you've got the novel with you, but you've also got a conception of the world inside you, and the truth that Philip's trying to tell. And then when you're trying to translate it for television, you're constantly keeping that truth in your head. The thing that I always loved about what Jane said about what she was going to do about the books right at the beginning was that thing of sounding every note. And I think that's what we've tried to do, is just try and capture the important notes and tell them to the best of our ability.
One of the things that I'm sure you've all read these books, and if you haven't, run out and read them, that makes this world so extraordinary is the whole concept of a demon. And for an actor, that's a really tricky proposition because it's not a character that's been animated or created for you to act against, but rather an extension of your actual living soul. So particularly, with Lyra, but also with Mrs. Coulter, that character betrays a lot about what you're going through. So I'm wondering how that worked for you as a company of actors. You're dealing with puppets at some points, but you're really imagining yourself outside of yourself. You want to start, Dafne?
Well, I think it was a massive help having it there because it does help you. You only do, the demon is the more sensible, the more responsible part of you. So, for example, Lyra will be running up on a roof, and she'll be about to jump, and Pam will be like, "No, don't jump," but she'll still jump. So it just helps that contradiction that she has in her head about this is dangerous, but I'm still going to do it anyway. So it does help you having that, and it's a beautiful relationship that, for example, Lyra has an amazing relationship with Pan. She really loves Pan, and she really takes care of Pan. She has these amazing scenes with Pan where it's just her and Pan talking, and it really helps you as an actor because you really see the interior of life of the character just by talking, because it's talking to yourself, but not because it's outside of you. So that really shows Lyra's love towards herself, and you can see different relationships with different characters towards themselves.
Ruth, you have a particularly nasty little demon.
Yes. My monkey is particularly nasty, but
Don't touch
well,
the monkey.
as I say, misunderstood.
Yes.
No, it was really amazing because these guys, very early on, they decided to use puppeteers to help us on the day. It not only helped us, but it helped the camera crew and the editors to know where these demons were going to be on the screen. But I have a guy called Brian who plays my monkey, and he's real. And Shush James. And he's lovely. He's like, and he's brilliant. Together, I knew that this was a key to who Mrs. Coulter was her relationship with her demon. And unlike everyone else, my demon does not speak. And I'm pretty cruel to my demon, and in return, my demon is pretty cruel to other people. And so we had to work out where that came from. And I think it's a real key to who Mrs. Coulter is. It's the key to who everyone is a relationship with themselves. And so that was, me and Brian worked a lot on how each scene we would move around a room, how each scene, if we're on our own, what that looked like. And it really gave so many more layers to who this character is through the eyes of by dealing with the demon and her relationship with it. So it was, and on the day you'd have him next to me. I mean, Brian was crawling around the floor next to me, or in some point, wasn't he? He was,
yeah. You'd be
And-
filming with Ruth, and Brian would be just like,
Yeah, and now they have to edit him out, and it's quite
Yeah.
sad to say goodbye to Brian. But
we love you, Brian.
we do. He's back for the second season. We hired him back.
Lynn, you play the most different character, I think, than you've ever played. I think people imagine you as many things, but I'm wondering about the conversation about Texan who flies balloons and why.
Typecast,
You know.
again. It was very simple, actually. I was working on Mary Poppins Returns at the time. I was in London, and Jane and Jack took me out for a drink, and I didn't know what it was about. I was a huge fan of the Harry Potter play. I'm a huge fan of everything Bad Wolf has done, and so I was like, yes, I will sit and have dinner. And they said his Dark Materials, and I said, yes! I didn't even know what the part was. I would have sharpened pencils for this. I'm a huge fan of the books. When my wife and I started dating, we read these books together. This is like part of our falling in love story, these books. And it's a beautiful coming-of-age story, and there's a love story in there as well. So they're in a really special place in my heart. And they said Lee Scoresby, and I said yes. And then I figured if they saw it, I could find my way to seeing it. And I love my demon. You know, I've been lucky enough to work at Sesame Street for many years. I write songs for Sesame Street. And when you bring kids to the set, they don't look at the Muppeteers. They're just talking to Elmo, they're just talking to Grover, and that's how it was for us with our demons after a while too. I had this amazing Arctic hare named Hester, and for me she was this beautiful puppet, and the puppeteer who worked with her was so brilliant that I would just be talking to Hester. My relationship with Hester is like, we're like our own little buddy cop movie in the middle of this show, because I think Lee's a lonely guy, he spends a lot of time alone in the air, so we talk to each other constantly. So that was my relationship with my demon.
So from Hester to Stella Maria, the thoroughly badass snow leopard.
Yeah, that's my soul. It's typecast again, right? I think one of the really cool things about this world is that when you're a child, before puberty, your demon is changeable, and it can change into any shape depending on what mood or just what you desire, or what would help the situation. But when you reach puberty, when you start to settle on who you actually are, your demon also settles on a form, on an animal's form. And I guess the day that Lord Asriel's demon settled as a snow leopard, he went, wow, I'm totally badass. And I'm a real loner, And this is the other interesting thing. In this world, once your demon settles, you get to look at yourself and go, wow, I'm a subservient dog. Or I'm a flighty sparrow. Or I'm a badass snow leopard that just walks his own path, you know what I mean? And it's just it's a very different kind of, I guess, relationship with yourself, and your own kind of self-possession changes because you've got a reflection of yourself right in front of you. You can't really hide from. You can't lie to. You can't lie about yourself. And by the way, everybody else can see what your soul is like as well. It's a really interesting, makes for interesting relationship dynamics.
Jane, when you looked at this project as something to develop, one of the things that this has that makes it so unique as a work of children's fiction or young people's fiction is it's very dark and complicated and philosophical. And the ideas that you're dealing with in this are maybe more easily written about than conveyed as acting. I would think when you're thinking about Milton and Blake and whether there's a God, you don't necessarily think that they lend themselves to fantasy as easily in film. How did you, without virtue of having, with Jack, without virtue of having explanatory paragraphs, how did the two of you think about how are we going to immediately get people right in there into this totally different kind of place?
Well, we fried each other's brains, I think, and those of everyone around us. I think that, Philip Pullman was our guide, really. In my experience, children love dark, complicated themes and big questions about who we are and where we are. And I think that Pullman never underestimates children, either as the hero and heroine of his books or as his readers. And Pullman says what he wrote was adult books that children should read, and I hope that we ended up making an adult piece that children will watch and should watch. But essentially we just followed his lead. He starts with Asriel trying to nearly poisoned by someone he thought was his friend, and so the story opens. We put a few little bits and pieces and treats in for the few minutes before that, but essentially everything starts as it started in the books, with an attempted murder that Lyra stops. And from that moment on, everything in the world opens and blasts out. So it's a roller coaster ride of a narrative. His books are real page turners, and we just followed that pace.
Jack, when you're thinking about the fantastical, because you've already done something that would seem impossible, which is to take a world where people cast spells and create magic and put it into a live performance, which is hard to do, obviously. Here, do you think about all the amazing, you can really get distracted, I would think, as a writer, by all the magical when you're really trying to drive the story with characterization and plot? Do you just say, I'm not thinking about those demons on their shoulder right now, or I'm not thinking about the fact they call electricity something else, or how do you...
By the way, Jaden's been very nice about the process. I got it wrong an awful lot, is the truth of how we developed this story. We did 46 drafts of episode 1, which is a lot of drafts to do.
I think that might be me getting it wrong more often than you, but...
You do sometimes get lost in other stuff, but the thing about the demons is that they are characters, and so, everything that Philip builds is for a reason. We wrote, Zandria, who's my script editor on this show, wrote papers on all sorts of different facets of this, so that we thought it was that thing of that PhD thing of just kind of like, we need to understand everything, and if we can understand everything, then we can tell a really basic story. And my favourite scenes in this show are just scenes between two characters. It's Lyra and Asriel together in a bedroom. It's Mrs. Coulter giving Lyra a bath. It's just little. It's Lyra stealing bacon from Lee Scoresby. It's little moments where you've just got the light coming in, and because we had these incredible actors that were prepared to test every single thing that I wrote and prepared to fight me on different things in a really interesting way. I just shared a 7-hour plane ride, no, an 11-hour plane ride with Ruth Wilson, in which we were sitting next to each other, more or less, and I was literally passing a laptop over the seats so that she could read stuff and then give me notes, and then I would rewrite and then show her again, and you know, that's what this process is about.
Sounds like a relaxing plane ride.
But
Sorry, Jack.
Jane always said this is a show made by people who are very passionate about it, and that's the truth. Every single, you know, I'd have massive arguments with our production designer, I'd have, you know, and these guys took control of it and made it the humanity of it, which Philip is so full of humanity, made that absolutely the centre of what we did.
It is an amazing story, especially when you look at it from Lyra's perspective, because it really is a coming-of-age story wrapped into a fantastical adventure. And I'm wondering, Dafne, how familiar were you with these books when you started out?
Well, the books came out before I was born, so...
That doesn't mean you can't read them.
That sounded really wrong. So I didn't really know about them, and I remember I had the audition. I had my last audition with Ruth, so I went into my audition, right, and I'd only been halfway through the book because I was like, nah, I'm not going to get it anyway, so just whatever. So I went into the audition, I did it, then I was called, they were like, you got it. I was like, oh, right, we've got to read 3 books now. So I read them, and at the beginning I was like, okay, let's just mind open. Literally, until I finished the 3 books, I did not close the book. They're just so they're so fun, they're so entertaining, they're so good, because Philip's amazing. I don't know how he gets these ideas, but I don't know where he gets these ideas from, honestly. But yeah, and it's also, if you look, it can be a children's story, but if you look deeper, you can really see all of these criticisms he does to lots of things. So I think it's quite age appropriate for everyone. And yeah, so I was a fan after I read the books, but before the show I had not heard of the books.
Actually, Dafne, that just convinces me you're an even better actress than I thought you were. Because when you did your audition, I thought you'd read the books.
I don't have an answer for that.
Kudos to you.
Ruth, Marisa Coulter is one of the most fascinating characters in fantasy literature because she's not readable despite the fact that she has a monkey on her shoulder on her lap. She's not someone whose motivations are really ultimately made clear until you're well into the story. I'm wondering for you, what drew you to the character? I mean, this is a character in stock children's fiction who could be played as just a nasty piece of work, but that's not what she is at all. In fact, she's far more interesting than that. So what was it about?
I said this earlier, but when my agent phoned me up and said they want to offer you Mrs. Coulter, and I didn't know the books either. I'd heard of them, and I'd heard about the play, but I hadn't read them. And I said, who? And they're like, come on, it's the most iconic character in kids' fiction. And I started reading the books, and there's a description of her as, she says, she's the cesspit of moral filth, and the mother of all evil. And I thought, okay, I have to play this role.
Okay.
Absolutely, I can't turn this down. And of course, it's really fun to play bad characters, but what I find so fascinating with her, I mean, she's so complicated, and she's unknowable, and she's frightening for that reason, but what we've done, and Philip Pullman gave us license to dig a bit deeper into her and to sort of see her on her own with her monkey, to see who she is without Lyra, and why she might do the things she does. And that for me was fascinating, to really dig into why she has a monkey, why can she separate from her demon when no one else can? Why, I mean, there's really, really deep, sort of sophisticated and complicated things about this character, which make her fascinating to watch and endlessly frightening because you never know which way she's going to turn. And that was what we've really enjoyed exploring with her. So it's great for me to play. I get to play all sort of facets of her. And that's what Philip allowed us to dig deeper.
It's a character that is frightening in some ways because she is so incredibly charming.
Yes. Yeah, she has this charm, and she's beautiful and glamorous, and she wears great outfits.
Great outfits.
Yeah, and she's got this monkey who's amazing looking. You know, she's very powerful, and that's why she's frightening, because she holds so much power, and she can manipulate. She's the master manipulator. So she's incredible, but she's deeply vulnerable. And when we get into her and see where and why, what makes her tick, it's kind of scary. And her vulnerability is Lyra. And when she comes across Lyra, that's when you start to see this one. You start to see all that kind of pull apart.
Yeah.
And for you, Lynn, you have a character who in some ways is out of our collective idea of a hero. There's a lot of in that hero's DNA that we would recognize, and you have to change it a little bit, and you have to play a lot of scenes with a very large bear.
Like you do.
And a rabbit.
Yeah.
And a rabbit and a bear.
Yeah, I think my first 2 days of filming were a very long, complicated sequence where I am literally pulling all the pulleys and ballasts on my hot air balloon, and the next day was like a 3-day bar fight. And I was like, this is just the most fun I've ever had. It was, it was pretty different from Mary Poppins Returns. But it was such a joy. It really, every day was such a joy. I remember thinking,
Yeah, I love that joke.
I remember when we were finishing filming at the end of last fall, and one of the crew guys was like, well, you're gonna go on a long holiday after all this work. And I was like, no. Me being a cowboy who flies a balloon and fights in bars was the holiday. I have to go back to real life now and write stuff and do other things. This was the vacation.
James, you are both intensely curious and
Curiously
intense.
Curious.
Stole my mind. In this part, one of the things about Lord Asriel that's interesting is so much of him is pulled in. He's got a lot of mystery to him, and a lot of what you have to convey is limited, at least certainly at the beginning. You're not allowed to convey a lot of what's on your mind, and both you and Ruth have to be not so nice to a child. I mean, you're not mean to her, but you're not, a little withholding.
And giving a lot of mean.
Right. I mean,
I'm not withholding the mean, I wouldn't say. I think what's really interesting, you said earlier, this is a sort of a coming of age story in a lot of ways around Dafne. And it's an amazing story of a young person who's an orphan who is struggling to identify herself. She has these two sort of proxy figures in her life, this uncle and this woman, Miss Coulter, who fill in as proxy parents, it seems, for a while. And she's trying to understand herself through them. I disappear, I run away. Daphne's trying to sort of understand this slippery, mercurial, quixotic figure of Mrs. Coulter as well. And we're so difficult to get a hold of. This girl just needs to get a hold of something. And it's just so compelling. And if we don't withhold, if we aren't mean, which is so crazy, isn't it? That a kid is going to love the person that treats them mean, It's because it's just someone, It's just heartbreaking. But yeah, we do have to be really mean. My demon's a snow leopard. I'm completely solitary, and I'm a predator. Do you know what I mean? I'm hardly cuddly. I'm going to give out, bedtime stories. But yeah, he's got a very important mission. This whole thing, in many ways, you said again, it's a coming of age story. The story won't work unless she comes of age, and that plays into the themes of the whole thing. The whole thing is about freedom, and Lord Asriel is all about attaining that freedom for everyone on a grand scale that we won't give away right now, but he'll sacrifice any love in his life for that goal, for that purpose. And some little girl that he keeps an eye on sometimes, he'll put that second.
in many ways, the characters are archetypal mother and father characters. They start one way, they end another. in some ways, she's bouncing off the two of you, looking for nurturing, looking for guidance, hero worship, and disappointment. Did you, Ruth and James, talk together about how you would play that, or how you would engage?
We met on this, I think, like the last 4 days of the shoot. I got the job very last minute. I got called by a very good friend of mine who's the casting director, going like, hey, you know these books, right? I was like, yeah, man, I've read them like 3 times. They went, you want to come and play the 3 starting Friday? I was like, yeah. So we really didn't have much chance to talk about anything, you and I.
No, but I've seen it, and yeah, he's pretty mean, and I'm pretty mean, so I think we've got...
They're quite similar. You're very similar to me. Yeah, not good.
You also both, I mean, the novels have a lot to say about religion, and they certainly can be interpreted as a critique of Western religion. And both you and James and Ruth, you both have had Catholic education. You came in from the inside, I would think. You bring special things to this work because you're looking at it through the lens of people who may have learned a lot of doctrine and theology in your educations. I'm wondering, do you think about that, about how, as people who may have been exposed to church teaching or grown up in a Catholic tradition, you know, how do you feel about the way the story works, or do you even think about it that way?
Yeah. I don't know if it's like purely Catholic. I mean, obviously Philip was probably referencing that in the books, but for me it's more about like authoritarian kind of dictatorship, or kind of institutions which are set up, which are authoritarian in nature. And I mean, yeah, I grew up a Catholic, and I no longer go to church, but I sort of believe, I think there's something different between faith and religion, and I suppose that's sort of something it discusses in the book too. But that's why these books are so fascinating. They kind of deal on such different levels. They deal with like just being a child, a coming of age story, but they're also about philosophy and religion and faith and spirituality and the animal sides of ourselves. So that's why they're kind of amazing and fascinating, and they keep you all like hooked in and surprised every page you turn of those novels, and in every scene you watch. There's something new to talk about and discuss, and how our community is structured and how we sort of live within our community, whether it needs politics or religion or family. So all those things are in the books and in this show.
Jack, when you think about these books, in a lot of ways they're deeply celebratory of the human spirit, of unmooring yourself from what you maybe feel like you ought to do, and living in the moment, living your life, finding your passion without giving up your soul, right? Do you think they're particularly timely at this moment when we're arguing about a lot of this stuff?
The thing that when we were pitching it around town, the thing that I kept on saying was that this is an anti-superhero story. In that, if this was a superhero story, you'd be following Lord Asriel's path, and that when, if you look at it, there's a sort of there's people that are seeking greatness in this story, and there are people that are following their own goodness. And the thing I love about Lyra is she is constantly following the path of the good. And whereas Azrael and Mrs. Coulter are set on great big missions and doing great big changes to the world, all of which are actually necessary in this world that they live in, that actually it's the young woman who's going, I want to be good. I've got a tattoo that's from E.T. Be good. I really believe that that we should be following our goodness right now, and we are getting distracted by greatness quite a lot in these arguments. And there's something very beautiful about the way that Philip sees the world and the way he communicates this world that I think it has got lessons for all of us.
Man, he hit you with the tattoo that was the thesis of the show. That's a flex. That's a flex, y'all.
And now
it's a
you're
quote
all
from
getting
E.T.
tattoos. Surprise. Jane, was this a tough sell to HBO to explain? Now look, we're going in. It's a fantasy novel. It's got a young heroine. It's totally different than what's on TV right now. How hard was it to kind of convey these very complicated ideas to the network, to sort of get it out there?
Well, it was a long process. It took us a couple of years to really begin to put the piece together in a way that people other than myself and Jack and Dan, my fellow executive producer, and a small group of people could see. The BBC came on it right from the start. The books are huge in the UK. They kind of like could take all of that on board quite easily. But as the piece grew and it became more expensive, and we looked for more partners to bring on board, it was a long conversation with HBO. I've been fortunate enough to work with them for many years.